My daughter lost her leg in a car accident when she was just 6. After months of recovery, surgeries, and tears, she finally got her prosthetic leg, and with it, a spark of confidence. Then one careless, bitter woman in an HOA meeting parking lot destroyed it in seconds, and acted like we were the problem. If you're a parent, or even just someone with a heart, you'll understand why I couldn't stay silent after what she did. And if stories like this hit you hard too, consider subscribing, because this isn't the first time an HOA crossed the line, and it won't be the last. There are some moments that split your life into a before and an after. The day of the accident was one of them. The sound of twisting metal, the scream, my daughter's scream, still echoes in the back of my mind like a nightmare on repeat. But nothing prepared me for the moment she looked up at me, tears in her eyes, and asked, "Will I ever run again?" She was 6. Just 6. The recovery was brutal. Not just the surgeries, not just the physical therapy. Those were hard, yes. But it was the emotional battle that nearly broke us. The once carefree little girl who used to race the wind in our backyard, climb trees, and twirl until she fell over, now sat silently in her wheelchair, watching other kids run by like she was made of glass. I tried everything, encouraging words, art therapy, even dog videos, just to make her smile again. But what finally worked wasn't a pep talk or a cute distraction. It was the prosthetic. The day she first stood up with her new leg, I cried like a baby, and not quietly. I cried because I saw her again. The light in her eyes, the fire, the hope. It was awkward and shaky, sure, but she stood. Then she took a step, then another, and by the end of the week, she was walking across our living room, arms out for balance, grinning like she just won the Olympics. She wanted to wear it everywhere, even when it rubbed her skin raw. "I want to get used to it," she'd say, pushing through the pain. She named it, decorated it with stickers, took photos with it like it was her best friend. That leg wasn't just a tool, it was a symbol of everything she'd fought to reclaim. So when our HOA scheduled an emergency meeting on a Saturday morning and I had to bring her with me, I didn't think much of it. She liked coming along now, said it made her feel like a grown-up. She walked beside me with her prosthetic leg in full view, wearing a bright yellow hoodie and a matching sunflower hair clip. We parked near the clubhouse. The lot was half full. She hopped out of the car carefully, holding my hand, and we started toward the doors. The leg clicked slightly with each step, but she didn't mind. She even hummed. That's how good her day had started. We were almost inside when she realized she'd forgotten her sketchbook in the back seat. "I'll get it," she chirped, already turning around. I started to say I'd grab it for her, but she waved me off, proud of her independence. I watched her go, step by careful step, confident in her stride, her little ponytail bouncing as she reached the car. Then came the screech. Tires. Too fast. I whipped around in time to see an SUV rounding the corner of the lot, way too quickly, and heading right toward our car. My daughter was behind it, crouched down near the back door, trying to grab her sketchbook from the floor. I shouted her name. The SUV didn't slow down. Then I heard it. A crunch. A sickening, heart-stopping crunch that made every cell in my body go cold. I ran. She was okay, physically, at least. The SUV didn't hit her. She'd backed up just in time. But what it did hit was her leg. Her prosthetic leg. It had slipped off in her rush to crouch down and open the car door, and the SUV had rolled right over it, cracking the frame and snapping the joint like a twig. It looked mangled, bent, destroyed. She was sitting on the ground, in shock, holding the ruined pieces in her lap. Her lip trembled. Her eyes locked on mine, wide and stunned, not from pain, but from confusion. She didn't understand yet what had happened. Then came Karen. Hair like a helmet, big sunglasses, the kind of fake smile that's all teeth and no warmth. She climbed out of the SUV like nothing had happened. She looked at the leg, looked at my daughter, then looked at me like we had done something wrong. "You can't just leave things lying around in a parking lot," she said with a scoff. I couldn't speak. I couldn't breathe. My daughter was still sitting there, now starting to cry, realizing what had just happened, while this woman stood over her with her arms folded, annoyed. Not concerned, Not apologetic. Just annoyed. You could have damaged my tires, she added. That's when I felt something inside me snap. I didn't yell. Not yet. I just picked up my daughter, held her close, and carried her back to our car. She clung to me, her small arms wrapped around my neck, shaking with sobs. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. The leg was ruined. The hope tied to it. Crushed. I sat her down in the back seat, wrapped a blanket around her, and kissed her forehead. She wouldn't look at me. She just stared at the broken leg on the floor. That night, she didn't speak a word. Not during dinner. Not when I offered to watch her favorite movie. Not even when I tucked her into bed. She just turned away from me, curled up tight, and clutched her old teddy bear like she used to when the phantom pain hit her after the amputation. I sat outside her room for over an hour, wondering how I was going to fix something that shouldn't have been broken in the first place. The prosthetic had cost more than most used cars. Insurance only covered a fraction. The rest had come from savings, donations, fundraisers, and pure will. And now, crushed like it meant nothing. But even worse than the shattered leg was what Karen had taken without even realizing it. My daughter's confidence. Her pride. The small victories we'd stacked day by day just to get her walking tall again. Wasn't about to let that go. The next morning, I filed a police report. Not that I expected much. The officer was sympathetic, sure. But since Karen hadn't hit my daughter herself, and since the leg had technically been on the ground, they couldn't promise anything beyond damage to personal property. That wasn't enough. I also called the prosthetics clinic. They said they'd see what they could do, but it would take weeks to replace the leg, and thousands of dollars. Again. Then I called the HOA. I wasn't angry yet. I was focused. I needed to know why Karen was even driving like that in the parking lot of a Saturday morning community meeting. I needed to know if this woman had a history. Spoiler, she did. Turns out, Karen was on the board. Of course she was. Turns out, she'd been cited more than once for reckless driving in the neighborhood. She'd backed into a mailbox last year. She'd nearly hit a cyclist 2 months ago. But every time someone complained, she brushed it off, and the board let it go. That's when the anger started to rise. I emailed the HOA with a formal complaint. Attached photos of the leg, a doctor's note, the repair estimate, and even security. Footage from a neighbor's driveway cam that caught the whole incident. Crystal clear. She saw my daughter, she just didn't stop. Days passed. No response. Finally, I got a short email. One line. We're sorry to hear about the incident, but the HOA is not liable for accidents that occur in the clubhouse parking lot. That was it. No apology, no acknowledgement, no accountability. I sat there staring at my screen, fists clenched, thinking about my daughter lying in bed upstairs, still refusing to get out of her pajamas, still too ashamed to leave the house with only one leg. Then I got a knock at the door. It was Karen. She stood on my front porch like she was doing me a favor. Big sunglasses again, perfectly manicured hands holding a manila envelope. I heard you filed a report, she said, like we were discussing weather. Look, I don't want this to get messy. The HOA's dealing with real issues right now, like the pool budget and dog waste violations, not prosthetic legs left behind in parking spots. I didn't speak. I couldn't trust myself to. She handed me the envelope. Inside was a check. For $500, the leg had cost over $14,000. This should cover it, right? She said, already turning to leave. Just don't make this a bigger deal than it needs to be. I didn't stop her. I just watched her walk away, because right then, I realized she didn't just disrespect my daughter. She saw her as inconvenient, an obstacle, an embarrassment, and she was hoping to slap a dollar sign on her mistake and move on. But I wasn't going to let her. The next day, I posted the footage online, not for revenge, not for sympathy, just the truth. I blurred my daughter's face, kept names out of it, but the clip spoke volumes. A little girl, a prosthetic leg, an SUV speeding through a lot, a woman stepping out, looking irritated instead of concerned, and the caption. This woman crushed my daughter's prosthetic leg. She gave us a check for $500. My daughter hasn't walked since. Within hours, it blew up. People were outraged. The comments poured in. Parents, survivors, veterans, strangers who didn't know us but felt the same gut punch I had watching that moment. By the end of the day, the HOA couldn't ignore it anymore. The board sent out a community-wide email, calling the post misleading and damaging to the HOA's reputation. That backfired fast. Neighbors started talking. More stories came out about Karen's behavior. Her temper, her entitled attitude, how she once threatened to tow a teenager's bike for being left too close to the sidewalk. Turns out, no one really liked her. They were just too tired to fight her. Until now. Meanwhile, my daughter was watching all this unfold from her tablet. She didn't say much at first, but I caught her reading the comments, the support, the kindness, people calling her brave, people saying she mattered. And for the first time since the incident, she smiled, a real one. She still hadn't put on her backup prosthetic. It didn't fit as well, it hurt. But I could see the spark again, faint, but there. The next week, the prosthetics clinic called. A donor had reached out after seeing the video. They were covering the full replacement and a custom upgrade. I cried again, but this time, it wasn't out of grief. It was relief. It was gratitude. It was knowing that no matter how cruel the world could be, there were still people out there who cared enough to help heal what others had broken. And Karen? She wasn't done yet. But neither was I. I never wanted to become that person, the one who makes noise, files complaints, stirs the pot at every HOA meeting. But when someone crushes your daughter's prosthetic leg and walks away like it's no big deal, silence feels like betrayal. After the video blew up and donations covered the cost of a new custom-fit leg, I finally breathed again. But it wasn't over. Karen was still on the HOA board, still driving through our neighborhood like she owned it, still walking around with that smug look like she had won. She even made a passive-aggressive post in the neighborhood group chat. Reminder to all, personal items should never be left in shared spaces where they could be damaged. Let's all be responsible homeowners. She didn't name us. She didn't have to. That was the moment I knew I couldn't just let this fade. Because if I did, she'd just keep doing it. To someone else. Maybe someone without a camera, without a platform, without the will to fight back. So I started digging. I requested minutes from previous board meetings. Talked to other residents. You'd be shocked at how much people are willing to say once they realize they're not the only ones who feel powerless. Turns out Karen had a history of bulldozing over other people. Figuratively and, in our case, nearly literally. She'd once had a neighbor fined because their son's wheelchair ramp was too visually disruptive. She'd pushed for a policy banning unsightly play equipment, which meant swing sets and basketball hoops. She even tried to get someone evicted for parking their ADA-accessible van too close to her driveway. It wasn't just about rules. It was about control, about punishing anyone who reminded her that the world didn't revolve around her. Compiled every story, every report, every note. I contacted others who'd filed complaints that were swept under the rug. I didn't come at the board with anger. I came with documentation. And then I did the one thing Karen never expected. I ran for the board. At first I didn't think I'd win. I wasn't part of the usual crowd. I didn't bake cookies or attend the monthly BBQs or laugh at the president's awful jokes. But people remembered the video. They remembered my daughter. They remembered what it felt like to be ignored. And then, in a surprise that even caught me off guard, I won. Not just a seat. I got the votes to become vice president of the board. Karen was stunned. I'll never forget her face at the next meeting. She didn't even make eye contact. Just sat there pretending like it didn't matter, scribbling into her notebook with those claw-like acrylic nails. But this time, I had a seat at the table. The first thing I did was propose a policy change. Any board member with multiple documented complaints involving physical harm, threats, or reckless behavior would be subject to a formal review and public vote for removal. Karen's face went pale. She tried to protest, said it was a personal attack. But I had the reports, the footage, the signatures from residents who had finally found their voice. She didn't stand a chance. The vote passed. Unanimously, Karen was removed from the board within 2 weeks. But I didn't stop there. I contacted a local journalist who had reached out after the video went viral, told her the full story. Not just about the prosthetic, but the whole pattern of behavior Karen had exhibited over the years. The woman wrote an article that tore the lid off everything. It was titled, "When Power Meets Cruelty: How One HOA Leader Went Too Far." Karen moved out of the neighborhood 2 months later, quietly. No goodbye posts, no bake sale farewell, just gone, and my daughter. She walked out of the clinic with her new leg that same week. It was better than the last one. Lighter, sleeker, custom painted in her favorite shade of teal with tiny sunflowers etched along the side. She stood up straighter with it, walked with more confidence, even started jogging again, just a little. But the biggest shift wasn't physical. It was the way she looked at herself. She no longer saw a victim. She saw a fighter. She saw someone worth standing up for. One afternoon, we walked past the community clubhouse, the same one we'd been heading to the day Karen ran over her prosthetic. She paused for a moment, then tugged my hand. "Can we go inside?" she asked. I looked down at her, surprised. "You sure?" She nodded. "I want to see it, where it happened." So we walked in. The sun filtered through the windows, the room empty and quiet. She walked to the middle of the floor, looked around, then turned back to me. "She doesn't get to own this place in my head," she said, soft but firm. And just like that, she took it back. That was the moment I knew she was going to be okay. Not just physically, not just emotionally, completely okay. Karen had tried to crush something that day, but she hadn't succeeded, because strength isn't just about what you can walk on. It's about what you won't let break you.